Welcome, and in this video I'm going to show you exactly how you can check for service area inside of Go High Level using N8N and Google's distance matrix API. Now, why would we even want to do this? Well, in this use case, I run Facebook ads for clients in a home service business, and it's pretty common to get leads outside of their service area. And I'm always servicing complaints from customers saying that they're paying for leads that are outside of their service area, or they're getting unqualified leads. Or if you're a person in the home service industry managing your own ads, you know the feeling. Facebook's algorithm isn't perfect, and we occasionally get leads outside of the service area. So what if we can determine whether those leads are in our service area or out of our service area automatically so that they become less of a nuisance? Now, if you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Justin, and I like to create content just like this, showing you how I solve problems in my business, the business of my clients, and those in my community. If you're new here, I run a community called Automation Station. I have a free community and a paid community. Inside of the free community, there are probably 50, 60 N8N templates in here, tons of free resources. Feel free to join. In this video, I am going to create an N8N template. That N8N template is going to be available for download only in the premium community, but do yourself a favor, join the free community, check it out. And if you think the premium community is for you, go ahead and join us. Now, don't worry, because this isn't actually a complex workflow, so you will be able to just copy what I'm doing. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm doing here. So if you don't want to download the template, you don't want to spend the money, that's fine. You can just watch this video all the way through and replicate what I'm doing here on the screen. But enough of that. So why do we want to do this? So essentially, in my use case, I'm solving a problem for me, my business, well, it's actually my client's business, but in my agency. And I collect the zip code using a Facebook instant form or Meta instant form. And in that zip code, taking that zip code, I want to evaluate that zip code to see if it's a certain distance away from my client's address. And I'm going to use Google's distance matrix API in order to do that. Now, depending on whether it is inside of the distance or the service radius or outside the service radius, I want to do certain things. Like, for example, if it is, let's call that a qualified lead. It's not quite qualified yet. We'll activate a bot to qualify the lead even further, ask it qualifying questions, potentially book an estimate automatically. We'll inform the client that they have a lead, and we'll send positive pixel data back to Meta. So that way we can help train our algorithm. And here, disqualifying, let's say, we'll call it disqualification, but maybe we just want to silence this lead. So maybe we want to turn off the bot, don't activate the bot. If we activate the bot on an unqualified lead, we're spending money every time that person sends a message. We use AI to process it and we respond, and we're also leading them on, which sometimes can make them upset because it's like, hey, why did you respond to my text message? Why did you have a full conversation if you knew we were outside of your service area? Also, maybe we want to inform the lead just using a static message saying, hey, thanks for your interest, but you're currently outside of our service area. If you think this was a mistake, call us back. And then don't bother the client. This is up to you and your client. Maybe your client will want to be notified when leads come in that are outside of the service area, but maybe they don't. Maybe they don't want to be notified. It makes you look better because now it looks like every single lead that comes in is coming in from the service area instead of a mix between outside of service area and inside of service area. Now, you're going to have that conversation with your clients because they are paying for their ads. In this case, my client does want to be notified whether they're in or out, but we can take certain actions like neutering the bot if we determine it's outside of our service area. So what else? We don't want to send a pixel client. We don't want to send positive reinforcement when we have a bad lead. So we don't want to send that pixel data to Meta telling it that was a good lead, right? Because we don't want to optimize on that. So let's go ahead and hop in. Now, I'm going to use a combination of Go High Level workflows and N8N, and I'm going to explain why here in a second. But if we come over here into my lead intake workflow, this is just a standard lead intake workflow that I have for this client. We essentially trigger this based off a Facebook lead form submitted. We do some things internal to the CRM, but a way that I used to check for service area in the past, and it works sometimes, but it relies on a very detailed zip code list, is we have a custom value in here that's literally a list of zip codes, and then we check if the contact's postal code matches any of those list of zip codes. Now, this works, but it has its limitations. You have to, one, develop an accurate list of zip codes or use a service to do that for you, and just hope that you didn't miss any zip codes in the process. Now, the reason why I don't like this is because, yeah, sure, I can use third-party services, but it's very difficult to fact check it. Now, if I serve clients nationwide, which I do, I don't know the difference between zip codes in Columbus, Ohio or Orlando, Florida. And so I can use a free service out there on the internet, but I really don't know if it's going to work correctly. And maybe sometimes the home service provider has a accurate zip code list, but most of them don't. And so this was a good stopgap, but it doesn't really work all the time. And I'll show you that custom value here just so you can see. Let's see, custom values. All right, so in here, if we come and I look at zip code list, you see we literally have a list of zip codes in a 35-mile radius of my client's service address. And so we're going to move away from this. And so what I'm going to do here in automations is I'm going to duplicate this workflow, and I'm literally just going to name it version 2 because we're going to make some modifications. Version 3, version 2. Awesome. Now we have this. We're going to hop in here and make some changes. So we're actually going to get rid of, we're not going to get rid of this yet. We're going to leave all this here. Right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a custom webhook. And I wonder if I can just use a webhook. I think I can just use a webhook. Yeah, I'm not even going to use the custom webhook because this is going to be free, right? I think we might pay some money, you know, in N8N or maybe per executions, depending on your plan, or maybe pay some money depending on how much volume you send to Google's distance matrix API. But there's a pretty generous free tier, so I'm pretty sure you probably won't even hit it. But if you come over here, I have the workflow built out already. I'll go through this whole thing here in a second, but what I want to do is I actually want to, let me deactivate this workflow here for a second so we can move into testing mode. But I'm going to come in here and I am going to copy this test webhook, and we're going to use the test webhook for now. So inside of the URL, I'm actually going to use the post method, and I'm going to send a message to that URL inside of N8N. If you're new to N8N, I have tons of videos on N8N, but if you're new, essentially it is a no-code automation system, kind of like make.com, and very similar to Go High Level Workflows. But essentially, I'm triggering this workflow using a webhook, meaning when I send a message to this workflow from Go High Level, it's going to do some things. And depending on what it does, we'll get a response, and we'll use that response to determine our next actions. I'll show you that here in a second. But I went ahead and pasted that here, and then all I want to do is pass in the postal code. I'm just going to type it like this with an underscore of the client. So let's go to, or I should say of the lead, the contact postal code, and then I can just save that. And what I'm going to do here for now is I'm going to delete all these, everything below here, because I actually don't want any notifications to happen here while I'm testing. Let's go ahead and delete this user assignment as well, and we should be good. Okay. So I have a test contact here. Right here, it's test contact, and I have a postal code of 33196 inside of this test contact. So you'll see where that becomes handy here in a second. But let's go ahead and run our test contact through this workflow as a test. And that's not going to work because we weren't listening. So let me go ahead and listen, and then we're going to run this test one more time. So let's go ahead and run this one more time. And then if I come over here, we should see a message. There you go. We just received a message from Go High Level, and it looks like we got everything from, it looks like we don't even need to pass in that custom data because the entire contact's information is passed in, which is pretty nice. So we have more than what we need here. And so what I'm going to do here is actually, I'm going to pin this data by clicking on the webhook and pressing P. And what that's going to do is allow us to work on this workflow without having to continue to hop back and forth from Go High Level and send data. So inside of the service area checker, this is essentially my Google Maps API call. So if you are unfamiliar, Google Distance Matrix API, if you're unfamiliar with Google's Distance Matrix API, I want you to go to console.cloud.google.com. And if you don't have an account set up already, you can go ahead and set up an account. You're going to come in here, you're going to create a new project. And then once you create a new project and you're in that project, it will look like this. I have another video on my YouTube channel of me creating an AI chatbot, and I show you exactly how to set up this Cloud Console. But if you go to console.cloud.google.com, sign up, you might have to add a payment method, but again, they have a pretty generous free tier. Once you get to this stage here, you already have a project created. You can search for Distance Matrix API. So I'm just going to type in Distance Matrix, and I already have mine enabled. But if you didn't have yours enabled, it'll say, hey, enable this API, and you can go ahead and click enable. I'm going to click manage, and it should give me an API key. Don't share this API key like I'm sharing it with you. You don't want to do that because technically you guys can take this API key and run up my bill, but don't worry, I'm going to delete this once I'm done. We're going to go ahead and we're not going to put any restrictions at the moment. You might want to put restrictions. It's a good idea. But I'm going to come over here, and inside of my key, I'm going to paste that key that we just created. So here is the API endpoint. So this is essentially how we talk to Google's Distance Matrix API. And I failed to mention what it does. It's kind of like you going to Google Maps and putting in an address, and it tells you how far it is, how long it's going to take you to get there, so on and so forth. And so if you come in here to Google's Distance Matrix API docs, I'm not going to go through and read all this for you, but feel free to reference this. It'll help you. But this is what we use to build our workflow. And so here you notice we're sending in the origins. Now the origins is my client's address, the home service provider's address, or their zip code in this case. So 33196 is a zip code in Miami, Florida, where this home service provider lives, right? And in theory, this is just a mock zip code here. But the destinations, this is where the lead is. What's the lead zip code? And we're using zip codes here because we don't necessarily need to be so precise. If you have a need for precision and you need to use the entire address, you can. You just have to account for it. You have to do what's called URL encoding because the spaces and the commas and the special characters will kind of mess up the request. So you just have to take an extra step in URL encode. However, in my use case, the zip code is going to be plenty. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to look for the postal code here on the left-hand side in the input, and I will drag and drop that. So we have the zip code in there, 33196. Looks like it is, maybe I should say 33186 just so we can have some distance there, so we can test. So we've got the origins, we have the destination, the units. We're going to use imperial because we are in the United States, but if you're outside of the United States, you can use the metric system. And then there's also some other settings in here. If you live in another country, you can set that in here so that you can get the appropriate behavior. All right, now we have another query parameter called key. These are query parameters, by the way. These are not body parameters, so very important for you to understand that. And this is the API key that we created earlier. And now if I go ahead and test this, let's see, I should get a response. There you go. So I got a response over here. You see the output on the left-hand side. I'm sorry, on the right-hand side. And you see we have a distance of 5.8 miles or 9,407 meters. Okay, we're actually going to use the meters function here or the meters parameter here, because it's a number. And with numbers, we can evaluate the numbers based on whether it's greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. And so essentially what I'm going to do is convert my service radius, which in this case is 35 miles, into meters. And so I'm just going to use Google to do that. So let's see, 35 miles to meters. And in here, it looks like it's 57,000 meters. I'm just going to round up. We don't need to be incredibly precise here. If you have a need, then be precise, but I don't have a need. So 57,000 meters. So technically, this should be within the service area. And so what I'm going to do here is in this if statement, that's what this is. I will come over here and I'll make sure that this response value, I'll show you what I did here. I just drag and drop the response value, which is 9,407, is number, because we're dealing with numbers here. You could tell by this little pound sign here next to value. Number is less than or equal to 57,000. That tells me it is within a 35-mile range. Now, what's cool about what we get in the response from Google's distance matrix is we also get the duration. You see here, 15 minutes or 909 seconds. That's important because maybe you want to determine service area based on how long it takes to get to the destination, which is very powerful because some folks, especially in Miami, it might take, 45 minutes to get 10 miles, and maybe they only want to be in a 20-minute radius. Well, you can use duration. That's a conversation you can have with your client to determine service area. So that's very, very powerful. That's something we couldn't do with the zip code list. Literally in Miami, if you're in 33196 and you try to get to 33176, it may be a short distance in mileage, but it may take you a whole lot of time with traffic and just roads being the way they are. So right here, if we execute this step, it should be a true branch, right? Because we are 5.8 miles away, and that's less than 35 miles, or 9,407 meters away, which is less than 57,000 meters. And then we will respond with a simple response of yes or no, okay? So we're going to go ahead and save this. And what I'm going to do is unpin this data. And then I'm going to execute this workflow again. So it's listening. Not sure why it's spinning here, and it ends bugging out a little bit here. But what I'm going to do is right here is I might actually have to use the custom webhook because I'm going to need to evaluate the response. And I don't think I can actually, so the normal webhook here is just like a one-way throw, okay? And if I just do the one-way throw, I'm not going to be able to evaluate the response. And so I'm going to leave this in the video because this is important for you guys to see. So instead of using this webhook, we're going to spend a penny and we're going to use the custom webhook, and we are going to post to the same URL. And then as far as the data, we don't need all the contact information. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pass in postal code and contact postal code. Okay, cool. So this JSON right here, very simple. All we're passing in is the postal code. So I'm just going to save that. Let me delete this. I'm actually going to come back in here. We're going to make some changes. So what I'm going to do is listen for a test event here, and we're going to send a test event. Come down here, save response from this webhook, and we're going to call this test contact. Okay, cool. And it looks like we got a response, but it didn't come back with anything. That's to be expected because I need to make one change. So here's a response. I'm going to pin this data really fast, and I'm going to come into the API request and notice that this, let's see if this actually was filled out. So let me come back here and make sure I put that in there. Let me execute this step. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, cool. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to unpin this data, and we're going to test this one more time, but we're going to test the entire workflow this time. So let's go back here, test again. Let's run our test contact through here and send it. And in the response, we got the result of yes. Now let's test if this actually works. So I'm going to come in here and put a North Carolina zip code in here and save this contact. And now I'm going to test this again, and I should get a response of no. Let's see what happens. If only 𝐭𝐻 would render. Okay. I guess it's not going to play games right now. Or let's say this. Not sure why 𝐭𝐻 wants to mess up now. It's not run. Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. There's a test contact. All right, send. We got a 404 because we weren't listening. All part of this development, which is fun and not frustrating at all. All right. And now we got a response of no, because we put a North Carolina address in there. And if I come back over here, we can see what came out of here was 757 miles, or what is that? 1,218,223 meters, which is definitely greater than 57,000. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to, because we have a response, we're going to save this. And what I'm going to do is put an if statement down here. And using the if statement, I'm going to evaluate whether it's in the service area. In service area, question mark. And let's say yes. We'll start with yes. We'll come down to custom webhook and look for the result is yes. This is lowercase because that's what I put inside of the responses inside of N8N. A lowercase yes and a lowercase no. Believe it or not, that actually matters. I'm going to come over here, duplicate this branch, and I'm going to say no. Result is no. So now we have a yes and a no branch. And so depending on what comes back from our N8N workflow, it's either going to be a yes or a no, or if there was an error, maybe we get a none. We can probably make some logic to account for that. But here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a contact tag. In this account, we have ISA, which stands for in service area for me. So let's go ahead and do that. And then we're going to add a tag if it's not in service area, which is NISA. And that stands for not in service area for me. And click save. There we go. Okay. So for the sake of this demonstration, I'm not going to continue with like what actions I'm going to do afterwards, like notifying the team or firing the metapixel. That's not really the point of this tutorial. I just want to show you that we can check the service area and do certain things with that information. We can determine what happens afterwards, whether it's in the service area or out of the service area. So let's come back over here and I'm going to publish this workflow. Now, when we publish this workflow, the test webhook that we were using earlier is no longer valid. We actually need to use the production URL. So if I come here to production, I'm just going to copy by clicking on it. And that production URL actually needs to come and replace the URL in our custom webhook. I'm going to save that. And then what we'll do here is let's go ahead and test the contact throughout this entire workflow. So I'm going to run this test. If I come here to N8N executions, I should see one that executes right now. Give it a second to update. There we go. It's running. Once it's done, it'll display the path it took inside of N8N. Awesome. So it's not in service area, remember, because our postal code is in North Carolina. And so if I come here to enrollment history and I check the execution path, you'll see what happened is it executed the webhook, it went to the service area checker, and it determined that it was not. So if I come over here and I look at my tags, I've been testing this contact over and over, so I might have a mix of tags. But let's see if we have an NISA tag. So we have both because I've been testing this, but let's go ahead and remove all these tags here just so that we can test. So let's come into here and let's put a 33186 now, which is that first zip code we tested, and save it. And now I'm going to run that test one more time. Come over here, wait till this execution completes. Should see it here in a second. Awesome. This should be in the service area is what I'm expecting. There you go. So it is in the service area. Let's see if our workflow read the same way. There you go. So it looks like it went down the yes path. If I come over here and refresh and then look at my tags, should see ISA. Cool. All right. So that's how you do it. Hopefully that's helpful. Some of you guys might be asking at this point, like, why did you use N8N? Why didn't you just do all of this inside of the workflow? If you can send custom webhooks to N8N, why can't you just send a custom webhook request to Google Distance Matrix API? And the answer is you can, but it's a little bit difficult. Now, if I come over here to the scratchpad that I have, the response, actually, we can look at it here inside of N8N. The response to our request, it comes out something like this. And the problem is, and it's not impossible to do this inside of a Go High level workflow, it just becomes a little bit more expensive, is that right here is the information. We want this information here, or potentially this information here if you're doing it via, duration or distance. So if you come in here to elements, you'll notice that rows is what we need to pull out, and rows is an array. In an array, you have elements. So you want to pull out this elements, and elements is an array. And then you have this distance property here that has a value parameter. And so like you have to dig deep. This whole thing is nested a few layers deep. And in order to pull that information out inside of Go High Level, you have to use either the combination of array functions, multiple array functions, which are premium actions that cost a penny each, I believe, or custom code functions, and hopefully get it right. And then you run the risk of it not handling errors correctly and it just kind of failing the workflow early. And so for that reason, I like to use N8N because I just have more control of the process and the data formatting coming in and out. So hopefully you found this tutorial valuable. This is definitely a value add for my clients. And I'm assuming if you're a home service agency that serves home service clients, you will probably be pretty interested in implementing something like this. So see you next time. Hopefully you found this helpful. Subscribe, comment, like, you name it. Peace.